This week we are reflecting on cheap people. That is quite a negative connotation to say someone is cheap. The formal and more polite way to say that is that someone is frugal. They are not actually exact synonyms. They don't mean the same thing. If you say someone is cheap, that is kind of an insult, and it is definitely criticizing the person. It has a negative connotation. However, if you say the person is frugal, then that might be a positive thing. It might mean that they are just very careful with their spending. They are very careful with their money. They keep their budget in mind, and they are reluctant to spend too much money. The opposite of frugal would be frivolous. That is a person who just spends their money easily or spends their money carelessly in some circumstances. Now, I think that the word frivolous has a negative connotation. So if you say someone is cheap, that means they are reluctant to spend money, and that's a problem. But when you say they are frivolous, that means they spend too much money, and that's a problem. So, how can we reflect on this topic? Well, let's divide the cheap people and the frugal people. Why is it a good thing to be frugal, meaning to be careful with your money, and maybe reluctant to spend too much money? And why is it a bad thing to be cheap, especially when it comes to your friends or family, when others are involved? As a side note, when you are talking about cheap products, you have to be very careful with the wording and the phrasing of these terms. If you say it's cheap, it could mean the price is low. It doesn't have to mean the quality is low. It might just be a cheap price. So if you hear somebody say that's cheap, then it might be just a low price and the quality is fine. That doesn't mean the quality is low. However, if you hear someone say that an item or a product is cheap, then that means the quality is low. In fact, if we're being very informal, you might hear someone say it's a cheap piece of crap. That is actually a common expression that's very informal, meaning that the computer or the car or whatever device you're using is really low quality and that you probably don't recommend it. But let's go back to cheap people. That term, that expression, again, is an insult. It's a negative connotation. And if you say that someone is cheap, that means that they don't like to spend money, then you might not want to do anything with that person who is unlikely to contribute.